The whistling wind carried dust through Turnwood, Montana territory. 1874. As Katherine Campbell clutched her weathered carpetbag and stepped off the stagecoach with trembling legs. The journey from Boston had been grueling, but nothing compared to the knot in her stomach as she faced the town that would be her new home, a place where no one knew her name, only that she was coming as someone's mail-order bride. Katherine's chestnut hair was pinned neatly beneath her bonnet, her blue dress wrinkled from days of travel. At 22, she'd never imagined herself crossing half a continent to marry a stranger, but her father's gambling debts and sudden death had left her with few options. The advertisement in the newspaper had promised security and respectability, both things she desperately needed. "You must be Miss Campbell," a portly man with spectacles approached. "I'm Mayor Higgins. Philip Walters asked me to meet you. He's indisposed at the moment, indisposed." Katherine repeated, her heart sinking. Was her intended husband already avoiding her? "He'll be along shortly, I'm sure," the mayor said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Let me take you to Mrs. Winter's boarding house. You can freshen up there." As they walked down the dusty Main Street, Katherine felt eyes boring into her from every direction. Women whispered behind gloved hands, and men stared openly. She'd expected curiosity, but not this thinly veiled hostility. "Don't mind them," Mayor Higgins muttered. "It's just that we haven't had a lady of your situation in Turnwood before." "My situation?" Katherine asked, confused. "A mail-order bride," he clarified, lowering his voice as if the words themselves were indecent. "At the boarding house, Mrs. Winters." A stout woman with iron-gray hair showed Katherine to a small room. "Dinner's at 6 sharp," she said curtly before closing the door. Katherine sat on the edge of the narrow bed, fighting tears. The exhaustion of travel, the uncertainty of her future, and the cold reception threatened to overwhelm her. She hadn't expected a parade, but neither had she anticipated being treated like an unwelcome intruder. She was still sitting there an hour later when a commotion erupted downstairs. Male voices argued loudly, followed by heavy footsteps on the stairs. The door burst open without a knock. A man with bloodshot eyes and disheveled clothing stumbled in. The stench of whiskey hit Katherine before he even spoke. "So you're the one," he slurred, looking her up and down. "Prettier than your picture, I'll give you that, Mr. Walters." Katherine stood, keeping the bed between them. "The very same." He attempted a bow and nearly toppled over. "Your husband-to-be. What do you think of me, Boston girl? Am I everything you dreamed of?" His laugh was harsh and bitter. Katherine's stomach turned. This drunken, unkempt man was nothing like the respectable rancher who had written such eloquent letters. "You're not what I expected, Mr. Walters. Disappointed," he sneered. "Well, join the club. I paid good money to get a proper lady out here, not some desperate." "That's enough, Philip." A tall figure filled the doorway. Broad-shouldered and commanding, he wore a dusty black hat and had a star pinned to his leather vest. The local lawman, Katherine realized with relief. "This ain't your business, Sheriff," Walters growled. "You're drunk in a lady's room. That makes it my business." The sheriff's voice was calm but left no room for argument. "Miss Campbell just arrived. Show some decency." "Decency?" Walters laughed. "She's a mail-order bride. She sold herself to the highest bidder." The sheriff's hand moved to his holster. "Get out, Philip. Sleep it off." Walters spat on the floor but backed toward the door. "Fine. She can wait till tomorrow, not like she's got anywhere else to go." He stumbled out, his footsteps echoing down the hall. The sheriff removed his hat, revealing sandy blonde hair. His eyes were the color of a summer sky, clear and direct. "I apologize for that, Miss Campbell. I'm Sheriff Adam Young, Katherine Campbell." Her voice shook slightly. "Thank you for intervening. Philip isn't usually quite so He hesitated. Drunk, hostile, disappointing, Katherine supplied. A hint of a smile touched the sheriff's lips. All of the above. He's had a rough time lately. His ranch is failing, and he thought. He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. He thought a wife would solve his problems, Katherine finished. The realization was bitter. She'd been a business transaction, nothing more, something like that. Sheriff Young shifted his weight. Rest up, Miss Campbell. Things might look better in the morning. He replaced his hat and nodded politely. Good evening. After he left, Katherine unpacked her meager belongings, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. But where could she go? Her funds were depleted, and returning to Boston would mean debtor's prison. She washed her face in the basin of cold water and changed into her nightgown. Tomorrow, she decided, she would meet with Mr. Walters properly and determine if there was any possibility of a decent marriage. If not, well, she would face that when the time came. The next morning, Katherine rose early and dressed with care in her best day dress, a modest blue cotton with white piping. At breakfast, Mrs. Winters served her lukewarm porridge without meeting her eyes. The other boarders' two elderly sisters and a traveling salesman stared openly before whispering among themselves. Katherine ate quickly and excused herself. Outside, Turnwood was already bustling with morning activity. She had just stepped onto the boardwalk when a woman in an expensive silk dress blocked her path. "So you're Philip's mail-order bride," the woman said, her pretty face twisted with disdain. "I'm Victoria Holloway. My father owns the bank." "Katherine Campbell," she replied, extending her hand. Victoria ignored it. "Let me give you some advice, Miss Campbell. Turnwood is a respectable town. We don't welcome women who sell themselves to men they've never met." Katherine's cheeks burned. "I haven't sold myself. I've agreed to a marriage arrangement, which is a perfectly legal and call it what you like," Victoria interrupted. But Philip Walters was meant for better than some desperate fortune hunter from back east. Before Katherine could respond, Sheriff Young appeared beside them. "Morning, ladies," he said pleasantly, though his eyes were watchful. "Everything all right here?" Victoria's demeanor changed instantly, her smile dazzling. "Adam, I was just welcoming Miss Campbell to town." "That's mighty neighborly of you, Victoria." His tone suggested he didn't believe her for a second. "Miss Campbell, I was just heading to check on Philip. Would you care to accompany me? Save you the trouble of finding his ranch on your own?" Katherine nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Sheriff. That would be most helpful." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Always the gentleman, aren't you, Adam? Well, enjoy your visit." She swept past them, her skirts rustling. "Sorry about that," Sheriff Young said as they walked toward the livery. "Victoria can be protective of what she considers hers." "Mr. Walters, you mean?" Katherine asked. They courted briefly last year, but her father put a stop to it when Philip's ranch started failing. He helped Katherine onto a gentle-looking mare. "You ride?" "I grew up with horses," she replied, settling comfortably into the saddle. Her father's gambling addiction had cost them their estate, but before that, riding had been her greatest joy. The sheriff looked impressed as he mounted his own horse. "Philip's place is about 3 miles out. Not a bad ride on a fine morning like this." They rode in companionable silence for a while, the Montana landscape opening up around them, rolling hills dotted with wildflowers, the distant mountains purple against the sky. Despite her circumstances, Katherine felt her spirits lift at the sheer beauty surrounding them. "May I ask why you came all this way to marry a man you've never met?" Sheriff Young asked eventually, his tone conversational rather than judgmental. Katherine considered deflecting but decided honesty might serve her better. "My father died with substantial debts. Our home and belongings were seized. I had few options: become a governess, work in a factory, or, Accept Mr. Walters' proposal. And the letters, were they promising? They were eloquent, describing a prosperous ranch and a man of character seeking a companion for life. She gave a small, wry smile. Not quite what I encountered yesterday. Philip was different before his brother died, Sheriff Young said quietly. Thomas was the steadying influence. Since the accident last year, Philip's been struggling. They crested a small hill, and a ranch came into view below, or what should have been a ranch. The barn roof was partially collapsed, the corral fence broken in several places, and the small herd of cattle looked thin and neglected. Catherine's heart sank. "This is it," the sheriff nodded grimly. "I'm afraid so." As they approached, a shot rang out. Catherine's horse reared, and she fought to control it. "That's far enough." Philip Walters stood on his porch, rifle in hand. "Go back to town, both of you." Sheriff Young moved his horse in front of Catherine's. "Put that rifle down, Philip. We're just here to talk." "Nothing to talk about." Walter's voice was slurred even at this early hour. "I've changed my mind. Don't need a wife, don't need anyone." "Mr. Walters," Katherine called out, "could we please discuss this? I've traveled a very long way." "Should have stayed in Boston." Another shot fired into the air. "Go on now, get off my property." Sheriff Young turned to Katherine. "We should leave. He's not in his right mind." They retreated, Walter's curses following them up the hill. Once they were a safe distance away, the sheriff stopped. "I'm sorry you had to see that, Miss Campbell. I'd hoped he'd sobered up and come to his senses." Katherine felt numb. "What happens now? I have nowhere to go, no money to return east." Sheriff Young looked troubled. "Turnwood's small, but there might be work. Mrs. Bennett at the general store sometimes needs help, or perhaps the school teacher could use an assistant. And in the meantime, I can't afford to stay at the boarding house beyond a few days." He thought for a moment. "My sister Emma has a spare room at her place. She might take you in while you sort things out." Hope flickered in Catherine's chest. "That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose." "Emma likes company. Her husband's a trail boss, gone months at a time with the cattle drives." He smiled reassuringly. "She'd welcome another woman around the place." As they rode back toward town, Katherine tried to process how drastically her plans had changed. No marriage, no security, just uncertainty in a town where she was already viewed with suspicion. They were approaching the main street when a commotion caught their attention. A crowd had gathered outside the saloon, voices raised in anger. "What now?" Sheriff Young muttered, spurring his horse forward. At the center of the crowd, Philip Walters swayed on his feet, waving a bottle of whiskey. Victoria Holloway stood nearby, her expression a mixture of disgust and satisfaction. "There she is," Walters roared when he spotted Katherine. "The mail-order bride who thought she could trap me. Well, I'm telling you all, I never intended to marry her. It was a joke, a bet with Thomas before he died." The townspeople turned to stare at Katherine, their faces hardening with judgment. "That's enough, Philip," Sheriff Young dismounted smoothly. "You're making a fool of yourself." "Am I?" Walters laughed bitterly. "Or am I just telling the truth? She came here thinking she'd get her hands on my land, but joke's on her. I'm nearly bankrupt." Victoria stepped forward, her voice carrying. "You see, this is what happens when we allow such women in Turnwood. They prey on vulnerable men, seeking to enrich themselves through false pretenses of marriage." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Katherine felt her face burn with humiliation. "That's unfair," Sheriff Young said firmly. "Miss Campbell answered an advertisement in good faith. If anyone's been misled, it's her." "Defending her already, Sheriff." Victoria's smile was venomous. "How gallant. Perhaps you'd like to marry her yourself." The crowd laughed, and Katherine wished the ground would open and swallow her. She dismounted with as much dignity as she could muster. I have no desire to marry someone who doesn't wish to marry me, she said clearly. Mr. Walters, consider our arrangement terminated. I release you from any obligation. Walters blinked, seemingly surprised by her calm response. Well, good, he sputtered. I don't need you or any woman telling me what to do on my own ranch. Clearly, Katherine replied dryly. She turned to Sheriff Young. If your sister's offer still stands, I would be most grateful for a place to stay while I determine my next steps. Before he could respond, Victoria stepped between them. You can't possibly mean to house this. This woman with your respectable sister. Think of Emma's reputation. Something shifted in the sheriff's expression, a hardening in his eyes, a tightening of his jaw. When he spoke, his voice was low but carried to every ear in the suddenly silent crowd. This woman has a name. Miss Katherine Campbell came here in good faith, invited by one of our own. She's been mistreated, humiliated, and now stands alone, far from home, and you all stand here judging her. He looked around at the townspeople, many of whom had the grace to look ashamed. Is this the Turnwood I've sworn to protect, a place where we condemn someone without cause? He stepped closer to Katherine, his tall frame providing a shield between her and the hostile crowd. Miss Campbell will be staying with my sister until she decides her future. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. Victoria's face flushed with anger. You'll regret this, Adam. My father won't be pleased. Your father's a reasonable man, Sheriff Young replied evenly. I expect he'd be appalled by his daughter's behavior today. He helped Katherine remount her horse, then swung into his own saddle. With a tip of his hat to the stunned crowd, he led her away from the confrontation. They rode in silence for several minutes before Katherine found her voice. Thank you, Sheriff. You didn't have to do that. Adam, he said. Call me Adam. And yes, I did have to do it. It was the right thing. He glanced at her with a small smile. Besides, Emma would never forgive me if I didn't bring home someone with an interesting story. Emma Young's home was a modest but well-kept cabin on the outskirts of town, surrounded by a vegetable garden and several fruit trees. Chickens clucked in a small coop, and a gray cat sunned itself on the porch. As they approached, a woman with the same sandy hair and blue eyes as Adam emerged from the cabin. She wiped her hands on her apron and broke into a welcoming smile. Adam, what a nice surprise. Her gaze shifted to Katherine with undisguised curiosity. Emma, this is Miss Katherine Campbell, Adam said, helping Katherine dismount. She needs a place to stay for a while. I thought of you. Emma's eyes widened slightly. The mail-order bride. I heard Philip Walters was expecting someone from back east. Katherine braced herself for more judgment, but Emma simply shook her head and smiled warmly. Well, you're certainly too good for the likes of him, especially these days. Come in, dear. You look exhausted. Adam explained the situation while Emma made coffee and set out a plate of freshly baked corn muffins. Unlike the others in town, she listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly indignant on Katherine's behalf. Well, of course you'll stay here, she declared when Adam finished. The spare room is small but comfortable, and don't you worry about Victoria Holloway and her gossip. That girl's been trying to run this town since she was in pigtails. I can pay something for room and board, Katherine offered, once I find work. Emma waved dismissively. We'll sort all that out later. For now, just rest and recover from your journey. She shot a pointed look at her brother. And Adam will make sure the town understands you're under the Young family's protection. Adam nodded, his expression serious. I'll speak with Reverend Parker. He has influence, and he doesn't tolerate unkindness in his congregation. Thank you both, Katherine said, emotion threatening to overwhelm her. I don't know what I would have done otherwise. You'd have managed, Emma said confidently. You crossed half a continent to make a new life. That takes courage most people don't have. After Adam left to return to his duties, Emma showed Katherine to a small but clean bedroom with a patchwork quilt on the narrow bed and curtains fluttering at the open window. "Rest," Emma urged. "Tomorrow's soon enough to worry about the future." Alone in the room, Katherine finally allowed herself to cry for her lost hopes, for her uncertain future, and surprisingly, with relief that she hadn't ended up married to Philip Walters after all. In the days that followed, Katherine settled into life at the young household. Emma was easy company, full of stories about Turnwood and its inhabitants. She taught Katherine to make sourdough bread, tend the vegetable garden, and can preserves for the coming winter. Adam visited regularly, usually staying for dinner and entertaining them with tales from his day. Katherine found herself looking forward to his visits, to his quiet humor and the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. A week after her arrival, Adam brought news. "Mrs. Bennett needs help at the general store. Her daughter's expecting a baby in Denver, and she's leaving to help with the birth. The position is yours if you want it." "That's wonderful," Katherine exclaimed. "When can I start?" "Tomorrow," Adam replied, looking pleased at her enthusiasm. "It's not glamorous work and Mrs. Bennett can be demanding, but it's honest employment. And right in the center of town, where everyone can see what a hard worker you are," Emma added meaningfully. "The best way to silence gossip is to prove yourself valuable to the community." The general store job proved challenging but rewarding. Mrs. Bennett was indeed demanding, expecting Katherine to learn the location and price of every item in the crowded store within days. But she was also fair, and when Katherine demonstrated her quick mind and facility with numbers, the older woman grudgingly approved. "You've got a good head on your shoulders," Mrs. Bennett remarked after Katherine reorganized the fabric inventory. "Not what I expected from she caught herself. "Well, from someone with your background. You mean a mail-order bride." Katherine said calmly, having grown accustomed to such remarks. "I was also a banker's daughter and a bookkeeper for my father's estate. People can be many things, Mrs. Bennett." The older woman had the grace to look abashed. "Indeed they can, Miss Campbell. Indeed they can." As the weeks passed, Katherine's reception in Turnwood gradually warmed. Regular customers at the store began to greet her by name. Women who had initially snubbed her now asked her advice on fabrics or cooking supplies. Even Reverend Parker made a point of welcoming her publicly at Sunday services. Only Victoria Holloway maintained her open hostility, making cutting remarks whenever their paths crossed and encouraging her friends to shop elsewhere. But her influence seemed to be waning, particularly when rumors spread that Philip Walters had abandoned his ranch and headed for the gold fields in the Dakota Territory. One evening in late August, Katherine was closing the store when Adam appeared at the door. "Thought I might walk you home," he said, his smile warming his tanned face. "It's a beautiful evening." They walked slowly through town, Adam pointing out constellations appearing in the darkening sky. Katherine was struck by how comfortable she felt in his presence, a feeling that had been growing steadily over the past weeks. "You've made quite an impression on Mrs. Bennett," Adam remarked. "She told me yesterday she doesn't know how she managed before you came along." Katherine laughed. "High praise indeed from Mrs. Bennett. I think she's finally forgiven me for being a mail-order bride." Adam's expression grew serious. "You know, I never understood why that bothered people so much. Half the marriages out here start with advertisements or letters. How else are people supposed to meet when towns are days apart and women are scarce? I think it's the idea that marriage should be based on love, not necessity," Katherine mused. "Though in my experience, Even respectable Boston marriages are often business arrangements in disguise. "And what about you?" Adam asked, his voice softening. "What kind of marriage would you want if you had the choice?" The question caught Katherine by surprise. She considered it carefully before answering. "I'd want a partnership, mutual respect, shared goals." She paused. "And yes, love, but the kind that grows from friendship and admiration, not just fleeting passion." Adam nodded slowly. "That sounds about right to me too." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken words. Katherine's heart beat faster as Adam's hand brushed against hers, then deliberately took hold of it. His palm was warm and calloused, enveloping her smaller hand completely. They walked the rest of the way in silence, but their intertwined hands spoke volumes. At Emma's gate, Adam reluctantly released her. "Good night, Katherine," he said, her name sounding like a caress on his lips. "Good night, Adam," she replied, suddenly shy. That night, Katherine lay awake long into the darkness, replaying the feel of Adam's hand in hers, wondering if what she was beginning to feel for the sheriff was reciprocated and what it might mean for her future in Turnwood. The answer came sooner than she expected. The next afternoon, Victoria Holloway swept into the general store, her expensive perfume filling the air. "Miss Campbell," she said coldly, "a word, if you please." Katherine continued stacking canned goods. "I'm working, Miss Holloway. If you need assistance with a purchase, I'm happy to help." "This isn't about shopping." Victoria moved closer, lowering her voice. "It's about Adam Young," Katherine stilled. "What about him? You need to stop whatever game you're playing. Adam is respected in this town. He has prospects. He doesn't need to be saddled with someone like you." "Someone like me?" Katherine turned to face her fully. "And what exactly am I, Miss Holloway? A desperate woman who tried to buy herself a husband." Victoria's perfectly painted lips curved in a cruel smile. "Do you think people don't see what you're doing? Failed with Philip, so now you're setting your cap for the sheriff." Katherine's temper flared. "My relationship with Sheriff Young is none of your concern. It is when you're using him to secure your position here." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Adam feels responsible for everyone in Turnwood. He pities you, nothing more. Don't mistake his kindness for affection." The words struck closer to Katherine's insecurities than she cared to admit. What if Victoria was right? What if Adam was simply being charitable to a woman with nowhere else to go? "I appreciate your concern," Katherine said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "But I think Sheriff Young is capable of making his own decisions about who deserves his time and attention." Victoria's laugh was brittle. "Oh, he'll come to his senses eventually. Men always do. And when he does, you'll find yourself alone again, shunned by the entire town." She turned to leave, then paused. "My father is hosting a harvest dance next Saturday. Everyone who matters in Turnwood will be there, including Adam. I suggest you find other plans for the evening." After she left, Katherine gripped the edge of the counter, struggling to compose herself. Victoria's words had planted seeds of doubt that threatened to take root. When Adam appeared at the store that evening for their now customary walk home, Katherine found herself holding back, creating a careful distance between them. "Everything all right?" he asked, his brow furrowing with concern. "Just tired," she lied. "It was busy today." He didn't press, but she felt his puzzled gaze on her throughout their walk. At Emma's gate, when he might normally have lingered, Katherine quickly bade him good night and hurried inside. Emma was setting the table for dinner. "You're back early," she observed, "and alone." "Did my brother not walk you home today?" "He did," Katherine replied, hanging her shawl on a peg by the door. "Emma, can I ask you something?" "Of course, dear." "The Holloways are hosting a harvest dance next Saturday. Is that something the whole town attends?" Emma snorted. "Hardly." Just those Bernard Holloway considers quality folk, which means people with money or influence. She glanced shrewdly at Katherine. Victoria mentioned it, did she? Katherine nodded reluctantly. And let me guess, she made it clear you weren't welcome, but that Adam would certainly be there. At Katherine's surprised look, Emma sighed. That girl's been trying to get her hooks into my brother for years. He's never shown the slightest interest, but she persists, she said. Katherine hesitated. She implied that Adam only spends time with me out of pity or duty. Emma set down the plates with a clatter. That's absolute nonsense. I've never seen my brother look at anyone the way he looks at you. Hope fluttered in Katherine's chest. Really? Really? Emma's expression softened. Katherine, I've watched you two circle each other for weeks now. It's obvious to anyone with eyes that there's something growing between you. But I have nothing to offer him, Katherine confessed her deepest fear. No money, no family connections, not even a respectable background anymore, just the scandal of being a failed mail-order bride. You underestimate yourself, Emma said firmly. And you underestimate Adam if you think he cares about any of that. He values honesty, courage, and kindness, all qualities you possess in abundance. Katherine wanted desperately to believe her, but Victoria's poisonous words had done their damage. For the next several days, she maintained a careful politeness with Adam, declining his invitations to walk and claiming exhaustion when he suggested Sunday dinner after church. The hurt and confusion in his eyes tore at her, but she convinced herself it was better this way, better to step back now before he realized she wasn't what he wanted or needed. The night of the Holloway's harvest dance arrived with perfect autumn weather, cool enough for dancing but not cold, with a full harvest moon illuminating the town. From Emma's porch, Katherine could hear the distant sounds of music and laughter from the grand Holloway house on the hill above town. Emma had been invited. Her husband's family had been among Turnwood's founders, but she had declined, choosing instead to spend the evening with Katherine making preserves from the last of the season's apples. They worked in companionable silence until a knock at the door startled them both. Adam stood on the porch, not in his usual sheriff's attire but dressed formally in a dark suit and crisp white shirt. His hair was neatly combed and he'd trimmed his beard. He looked handsome enough to take Katherine's breath away. "Adam," Emma exclaimed. "Shouldn't you be at the Holloways by now? Bernard will be offended if the sheriff doesn't make an appearance." "Bernard will survive," Adam replied, his eyes fixed on Katherine. "May I come in?" Emma wiped her hands on her apron. "Actually, I just remembered something I need to check in the root cellar. Excuse me." She disappeared with a meaningful glance at Katherine. Adam stepped inside, removing his hat. "You've been avoiding me," he said without preamble. Katherine looked down at her apple-stained hands. "I've been busy." Katherine, just her name, spoken softly but with such intent that she had to meet his gaze. "Tell me what's wrong. If I've offended you somehow, or if you don't want my company anymore, just say so plainly." "It's not that," she said quickly. "It's just—" "Victoria Holloway, Victoria." Adam's expression darkened. "What did she say to you?" Katherine hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "She suggested that your interest in me was merely charitable. That you felt responsible for me after Philip rejected me, and that you would eventually come to your senses." Adam's jaw tightened. "And you believed her?" "I don't know what to believe," Katherine admitted. "I came to Turnwood to marry a man I'd never met. Instead, I found myself alone, dependent on the kindness of strangers. It would make sense if your attention was motivated by pity." Adam stepped closer. "Is that what you think? That I spend time with you out of obligation? Why else would someone like you be interested in someone like me?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "Someone like me," Adam repeated, a hint of amusement in his voice. A small-town sheriff with nothing to his name but a badge and a horse. And someone like you, educated, refined, brave enough to travel across a continent for a chance at a new life." He shook his head. "Katherine, I'm the one who should be wondering what you see in me." Hope bloomed in her chest. "Then you do. See me as more than just a responsibility." In answer, Adam closed the distance between them. His hands, gentle despite their strength, cupped her face. "I see you as the woman I've fallen in love with," he said simply. "If you'll have me." Katherine's heart soared. "Even though I came here as another man's mail-order bride, that's part of your story, not the whole of who you are." His thumbs traced her cheekbones. "The question is, can you love a man whose duty sometimes takes him away at odd hours and puts him in danger? Whose salary will never provide the comforts you knew in Boston?" "I didn't come west looking for comforts," Katherine whispered. "I came looking for a home. And I've found it not in a place, but in a person." Adam's smile was radiant as he lowered his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as Katherine responded, her arms encircling his neck. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "I should have done that weeks ago," Adam murmured, his forehead resting against hers. "Yes, you should have," Katherine agreed, smiling up at him. The sound of a throat clearing broke the moment. Emma stood in the doorway, grinning broadly. "I see you two have sorted things out. About time, too." Adam laughed, keeping an arm around Katherine's waist. "Emma, would you mind if I took Katherine for a walk? There's something I'd like to ask her." Emma shooed them out with a knowing smile. "Take your time. The apples will wait." Outside, the night was clear and star-filled. Adam led Katherine not toward town but in the opposite direction, up a small hill overlooking the valley. "I come here sometimes to think," he said as they reached the top. Below them, Turnwood's lights twinkled, and in the distance, the Holloway house blazed with lanterns. "It helps me remember why I do what I do to protect this place and its people." "It's beautiful," Katherine said, drawing her shawl closer against the evening chill. Adam turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Katherine, I know this is sudden. We've known each other only a short time. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life." He took a deep breath. "I love you. Will you marry me?" Joy bubbled up inside her, pure and sweet. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you." Adam's smile was incandescent as he pulled her into his arms. This time their kiss was celebratory, filled with promises of the future they would build together. As they walked back to Emma's, hand in hand, Adam said, "You know this will cause talk. The sheriff marrying the mail-order bride who was rejected by Philip Walters." Katherine laughed. "Let them talk. We know the truth that I didn't settle for you, Adam Young. I chose you just as you chose me." The news of their engagement spread through Turnwood like wildfire. Most reactions were positive. The sheriff was well respected, and Katherine had proven herself hardworking and respectable despite her unconventional arrival. Mrs. Bennet even offered to close the store for a day for the wedding, a concession previously unheard of. Victoria Holloway's fury was spectacular but short-lived. Her father, perhaps recognizing a lost cause, suggested she visit relatives in St. Louis for the winter, a suggestion Victoria reluctantly accepted. The wedding was set for October, giving them just enough time for proper banns to be read. Emma threw herself into preparations, enlisting half the women in town to help with the cake, decorations, and Katherine's dress. 3 days before the wedding, an unexpected visitor arrived in Turnwood. Katherine was arranging a display of winter boots when the store door opened, and a familiar figure stumbled in. Philip Walters was thinner than when she'd last seen him, his clothes dusty from travel, his face weathered. But his eyes were clear, without the glazed look of drunkenness. "Miss Campbell," he said, removing his hat. I heard you were working here. Katherine straightened, wary but composed. Mr. Walters, what brings you back to Turnwood? He shifted uncomfortably. Came to settle some business with the bank and to apologize to you. At her surprised look, he continued, I behaved abominably when you arrived. You deserved better. Yes, I did, Katherine agreed, but without rancor. Thank you for acknowledging that. I was drinking heavily then, drowning in grief for my brother and self-pity over the ranch. He twisted his hat in his hands. I'm sober now. Have been for 2 months, working a silver claim in the Dakotas, making a decent living. I'm glad to hear it, Katherine said sincerely. Philip nodded. I also heard you're marrying Young. He's a good man, better than I could have been to you. Yes, he is, Katherine agreed softly. Well, I won't keep you. Philip replaced his hat. Just wanted to clear the air before I left town again. He paused at the door. I hope he makes you happy, Miss Campbell. He already does, Katherine replied. And I wish you well, Mr. Walters, truly. After he left, Katherine found herself smiling. The encounter had provided an unexpected sense of closure on a chapter of her life that had begun with such uncertainty. That evening, when she told Adam about Philip's visit, he was thoughtful. Sounds like he's finally facing his demons. Good for him. It made me realize how fortunate I am, Katherine said, nestling against Adam's side as they sat on Emma's porch. If Philip had been sober when I arrived, if he'd been the man his letters promised, I might have married him. And I'd have spent my life wondering why I felt so hollow inside, Adam murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. The wedding day dawned clear and cool, with golden leaves drifting on a gentle breeze. The small white church was filled to capacity, the townspeople now fully embracing the romance of their sheriff, and the mail-order bride who had found love unexpectedly. Katherine wore a simple dress of ivory silk that Emma had helped her make, with lace at the collar and cuffs that had once adorned Emma's own wedding gown. Her hair was swept up with sprigs of late-blooming wildflowers, and she carried a bouquet of autumn roses from Mrs. Bennett's garden. As she walked down the aisle on Reverend Parker's arm, standing in for her late father, Katherine saw only Adam waiting at the altar, his face alight with love and pride. The rest of the congregation faded away until it was just the two of them, promising to love and cherish each other for the rest of their lives. At the reception in the church hall, Mayor Higgins, the same man who had met Katherine with such reservation months before, raised a toast. To Sheriff Young and his bride, may they remind us all that love finds us in the most unexpected ways, and that sometimes the most unconventional beginnings lead to the most blessed endings. As the celebration continued around them, Adam pulled Katherine aside into a quiet corner. Mrs. Young, he said, testing the sound of her new name, there's something I need to tell you. That sounds serious, Katherine replied, searching his face. It is. His eyes twinkled. I've been offered the position of federal marshal for the territory. Katherine's eyes widened. Adam. That's a tremendous honor. It would mean more responsibility, a larger territory to cover. His expression grew serious, but also more danger, and I'd be away from home more often. Is it something you want? Katherine asked. Only if you're willing. He took her hands in his. I won't accept if you have reservations. We're partners now in everything. Katherine considered it carefully. I think you would make an excellent marshal, and while I'll worry when you're away, I'll be prouder still of the work you're doing. She smiled up at him. Besides, I'm not exactly delicate. Emma's been teaching me to shoot. Adam laughed. Has she now? Well, Mrs. Young, you continue to surprise me. He pulled her closer. I love you, Katherine, more than I ever thought possible. And I love you, Marshal Young, she replied, rising on tiptoes to kiss him as the gathering applauded their public display of affection. In the months that followed, Adam and Katherine settled into married life in the small house he had been building on the outskirts of town. With his new position came a better salary, allowing them to add comfortable touches to their home bookshelves filled with volumes Katherine had missed from her Boston life. A piano that Adam insisted on buying when he discovered she played, comfortable furniture that made the house truly theirs. Katherine continued working at the general store, eventually becoming Mrs. Bennett's partner when the older woman decided to semi-retire. The store flourished under Katherine's management, expanding to include books, musical instruments, and fine fabrics that previously had to be ordered from Helena or even St. Louis. Adam's duties as marshal took him away for days or sometimes weeks, but his homecomings were joyful reunions that strengthened their bond. Katherine never complained about his absences, understanding that his work was part of who he was, one of the qualities she had fallen in love with. In the spring, when the wildflowers carpeted the hills around Turnwood, Katherine shared news that brought tears of joy to Adam's eyes. They were expecting a child. "A baby," he whispered, his hand reverently touching her still flat stomach. "Our baby." "Due in November," Katherine confirmed, laughing at his wonder. "Emma suspected before I did, said I had the same glow she remembered from her own pregnancies." As Katherine's pregnancy progressed, Adam arranged for a deputy marshal to handle more of the distant territory, keeping him closer to home. The town rallied around them, with women offering advice and baby clothes, men volunteering to help Adam finish the nursery. Even Victoria Holloway, returned from St. Louis with a wealthy fiancé in tow, sent a silver rattle as a peace offering. "Seems she's finally grown up a bit," Emma observed when the gift arrived. Their son, Thomas Adam Young, was born on a snowy November night with Emma and the town's midwife attending. When Adam first held his son, his hands trembling slightly, Katherine saw in his face the same look of awe and devotion he'd shown on their wedding day. "He's perfect," Adam whispered, carefully returning the swaddled infant to Katherine's arms. "Just like his mother." As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, Katherine sometimes marveled at the twists of fate that had brought her to this life. Had she known on that dusty day when she first stepped off the stagecoach in Turnwood that she would find not the husband she expected, but the love she had never dared to dream of, perhaps the journey would have seemed less daunting. By their second anniversary, the story of the mail-order bride and the sheriff had become a favorite local romance, embellished with each telling. Few now remembered the initial shunning, the whispers, the judgment. In the collective memory of Turnwood, Katherine had always belonged there, had always been Adam's intended bride. On a warm summer evening, as they sat on their porch watching 3-year-old Thomas chasing fireflies in the yard and Katherine cradling their newborn daughter, Elizabeth Emma, in her arms, Adam smiled at his wife. "You ever regret it?" he asked softly. "Coming west, all you went through?" Katherine looked at their children, their home, and finally at the man beside her, her partner, her love, her unexpected destiny. "Not for a moment," she replied. "Every step led me here to you. How could I regret that?" Adam took her hand, his thumb gently stroking her palm. "That day in town, when Philip was making a scene and Victoria was stirring up the crowd against you, I knew." "Knew what?" "That I'd defend you against anyone, anything." His blue eyes were intense with memory. "I almost said it right there in front of everyone." "Said what?" Katherine prompted, though she thought she knew. Adam's smile was tender as he leaned closer. "That you were mine and I was yours from that very first moment. The rest of the world just hadn't caught up yet." As the sun set over the Montana hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Katherine leaned her head against her husband's shoulder. surrounded by the family they had created and the love that had found them against all odds. In this moment of perfect contentment, she silently blessed the journey that had brought her here, every difficult step, every tear, every moment of uncertainty, for they had all led to this, a life richer and more fulfilling than any she could have imagined. And when Adam kissed her as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Katherine knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, no longer the shunned mail-order bride, but a beloved wife, mother, and vital part of a community that had, at last, become truly her own.